My husband spat the words across the dinner table, loud enough for his mother and sister to enjoy every syllable. "You're nothing without me, Evelyn. Pathetic, ungrateful, useless." Their laughter rang out, sharp and cruel as I sat frozen, cheeks burning with humiliation. Tears blurred my vision, but somewhere beneath the shame, anger stirred. I pressed my palm against my trembling face, wondering how much longer I could endure. Then, a sound cut through the mockery, the heavy, deliberate stomp of boots approaching the door. The laughter faltered, silence pressed in, and I realized something was about to change forever. I used to believe I had married the man of my dreams. Daniel was charming when we met, the kind of man who remembered the small details about me, who sent flowers to my office just because, who convinced me that fairy tales could bleed into real life. For a while, I floated in that illusion, telling myself that the knots in my stomach were nothing more than nerves, that the cracks in his kindness were simply stress from work. But love, as I would soon learn, can be the cruelest blindfold. The first sign was money. At first, it seemed protective, even flattering. "I'll handle the bills, sweetheart," Daniel had said with that easy smile. "You don't need to worry about a thing." And I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that having someone to lean on was security, not a chain. But soon, every purchase needed an explanation. A new dress? Why waste money when you already have so many? A lunch with an old friend? That's extravagant. He wasn't asking, he was dictating. My paycheck went into our joint account, but only his signature mattered when money left it. Margaret, my mother-in-law, only fueled the fire. Her words were dipped in honey, but poisoned underneath. "Oh, Evelyn, you're so lucky Daniel takes care of everything. You'd be lost without him." She'd say it at dinners, smiling sweetly while her eyes flickered with disdain. At first, I laughed politely, unsure whether she meant it as a joke, but the jokes multiplied, sharp little needles dressed in silk. "Daniel works so hard, and what do you do all day? A husband like him deserves better." Her voice was always calm, refined, but I could feel the smirk in every syllable. Then came the isolation. Daniel had opinions about my friends, each more damning than the last. "Clara is jealous of you, she's toxic. Mark just wants to sleep with you. Rachel fills your head with nonsense." One by one, my lifelines were cut until my phone stopped buzzing altogether. When I mentioned calling my mother, his tone sharpened. "Why burden her? Don't you think she's happier not worrying about you?" Slowly, I stopped reaching out. The silence grew thicker by the day until it was just me, Daniel, and the walls of the house. But the cruelest trick was the gaslighting. If I protested, if I so much as frowned when he controlled or belittled me, he'd tilt his head, almost amused. "You're too sensitive, Evelyn. You always imagine the worst. Maybe you should talk to someone about your paranoia." At times, I questioned my own memory. Did he really call me pathetic, or had I exaggerated it in my mind? Did he really grab my arm too tightly, or was I overreacting? Doubt wormed its way into my bones, making me distrust my own senses. And yet, despite everything, there were moments when he could still be the man I had fallen for. On those rare nights, he would surprise me with takeout, kiss my forehead, whisper, "You know I love you, right?" Those fleeting gestures became dangerous. They kept me tethered, convincing me that maybe I was overthinking. It was a cycle: pain, apology, fleeting tenderness, and then pain again. Each loop cut deeper than the last. The turning point came by accident. One evening, I returned home earlier than expected. From the hallway, I heard Daniel's voice, low, sharp, conspiratorial. He was in the study with Victoria, his sister, their words muffled but urgent. I froze, heart pounding, listening. "We need to transfer everything before she notices. The deed, the savings, even the investments. It should all be in your name, Victoria, not hers." My body went cold. My name, my life, being reduced to everything to be taken, stolen, handed away. Victoria laughed softly. She's too naive to ever realize. By the time she figures it out, she'll have nothing left. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The room spun as the weight of their words pressed down on me. All those years, every little humiliation, every cut disguised as care. It was never about love. I wasn't a wife. I was an obstacle, a piece on their board, ready to be removed when convenient. I stumbled back into the bedroom, forcing my hands not to shake, not to cry out. My vision blurred with tears, but this time they didn't burn the way they usually did. This time, something colder, sharper, settled inside me. Rage? Yes, but also clarity. The fog was gone. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't sensitive. They were planning to destroy me. That night, I opened my drawer and pulled out a small USB drive I had bought weeks ago but never used. My fingers clenched around it until my knuckles whitened. It felt like more than plastic. It felt like the first weapon I had ever held in my war. I whispered to the empty room, my voice raw but steady. This time I will not cry. Not for him. Not for them. I plugged the USB into my laptop, and for the first time in years, I felt control slipping back into my hands. The night I discovered Daniel's plan with Victoria, something inside me shifted. Grief had been replaced by resolve, and I knew my survival depended on one thing: proof. Without it, their word would crush mine. With it, I might stand a chance. I started small. I left my phone on the counter during arguments, the recording app hidden behind an innocuous screen. At first, I captured little more than raised voices and insults, but soon the recordings became sharper, undeniable, his tone dripping with contempt, his threats no longer veiled. "If you ever try to leave me, Evelyn, you'll regret it," he snarled one night, unaware that his own words were being etched into digital memory. Paper trails became my next weapon. Daniel was careless, too certain of his control. Bills, contracts, account summaries. He left them scattered across his desk, assuming I wouldn't dare touch them. But I learned to move like a shadow, slipping into the study when he showered, snapping photos with my phone before returning every paper to its place. Each file was another thread in the web I was spinning, each image a step closer to freedom. The danger grew with every secret action. One afternoon, while Daniel was at work, I sat at his desk copying files onto the small USB. My heart raced, palms slick with sweat, as I watched the progress bar crawl across the screen. Then, a sound. A door clicking open. Daniel had returned early. I yanked the drive free, shoving it into my pocket as I darted toward the hallway. My pulse thundered in my ears. I had barely rounded the corner when his footsteps echoed closer. I pressed myself against the wall, holding my breath, praying he wouldn't hear the pounding in my chest. From my vantage point, I saw him step into the study, his tall frame filling the doorway. He glanced at the desk, his brow furrowing. The laptop glowed, still open. He lingered there, eyes narrowing, suspicion flaring. My throat tightened, every second stretching into an eternity. Then he shrugged, muttered something under his breath, and shut the lid. He walked away, oblivious. Only when the sound of his footsteps faded did I dare to breathe. I slipped out the back door, knees trembling, clutching the USB like it was the only thing tethering me to hope. But evidence alone would not save me. I needed allies. Quietly, carefully, I reached out. I contacted a lawyer recommended by an old colleague, a woman known for dismantling cases of abuse and financial manipulation. Meeting her was like exhaling after years of suffocation. She didn't question me, didn't doubt my story. Instead, she nodded and said, "We'll need every shred of evidence. Don't stop." I also booked sessions with a therapist under the guise of stress counseling. Speaking the truth out loud for the first time was both terrifying and liberating. Each appointment became a sanctuary where I could shed the mask and remember that I wasn't insane. I was surviving. And then, I turned to the one person I knew I could trust completely, my father. I hadn't told him everything before. Pride and shame had sealed my lips. But when I finally confessed, his face hardened in a way I hadn't seen since childhood. "I should have known," he muttered, his jaw clenched. "Don't worry, Evelyn. I'll take care of this." He didn't say how, but I could see it in his eyes. The soldier in him had awakened. From that moment, I knew I wasn't fighting alone. Meanwhile, I began building a financial escape. Every week, I siphoned off tiny amounts, so small Daniel wouldn't notice, from grocery money, household allowances, even coins from his discarded pockets. I deposited them into a hidden account under my name. Watching the balance grow, even slowly, was like planting seeds in a desert. It wasn't much, but it was mine. One afternoon, I took a rare risk. I left the house and sat on a bench in the park, sunlight warming my face. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to imagine life beyond Daniel's shadow. A life where my money was mine, where I answered to no one but myself, where laughter wasn't cruel but genuine. The thought made me smile, an unfamiliar expression that startled even me, but the fragile peace shattered with a vibration in my pocket. My phone buzzed with a message, and when I saw the name, my stomach dropped. It was from Clara, my only remaining friend, the one I had clung to when everyone else faded. The message was short, almost casual. "Margaret says you've been acting strange. You should be careful, Evelyn. She's watching." My blood ran cold. Clara. The one person I thought I had left was talking to Margaret. My chest tightened, breath coming shallow as realization sank in. I had no friends left, only enemies hiding in plain sight. And if Clara had betrayed me, then Daniel and his family knew more than I imagined. After Clara's betrayal, I knew the walls were closing in. Trust was a luxury I could no longer afford. The only option left was silence and patience. I slipped back into the role Daniel and his family expected of me, the obedient wife, pliant and docile. It was a mask I hated, but one I wore with precision. I cooked meals on time, laughed politely at Margaret's passive-aggressive remarks, and never raised my voice when Daniel scolded me for imagined mistakes. Every cruel word, every roll of the eyes, every deliberate humiliation, I swallowed whole. Each time Margaret told her bridge club how lucky Daniel was to have married such a docile woman, I forced myself to smile. They saw submission. I knew it was camouflage. The more I yielded, the bolder they became. Daniel grew careless in his arrogance, lashing out without fear of consequence. Margaret's critiques sharpened, turning from whispers to open declarations. Victoria flaunted her presence in our home, speaking as if she owned the walls around me. They thought I was broken. But in truth, every cut only sharpened my blade. At night, when the house fell quiet, I returned to myself. I wrote in my journal, page after page filled with their insults, the exact phrasing, the exact times. My hand cramped from writing, but I refused to stop. Each word was a wound recorded, each entry a ledger of suffering. If they ever thought their cruelty would vanish into thin air, they were wrong. If they knew that every word they spoke was being preserved, I scribbled one night, would they still laugh? Patience became my shield. I learned to breathe through the rage, to let humiliation wash over me like cold water without reacting. I let them think I was shrinking, while in truth I was stretching, expanding into a woman they couldn't see coming. But endurance was not enough. I needed to understand them, to know their weaknesses as well as they knew mine. So I began to study them the way a predator studies prey. Daniel was easy. His temper was short, his pride volcanic. The smallest challenge to his authority set him ablaze. He needed control, not love, and every decision he made stemmed from that hunger. I noted the times he snapped, the triggers that sent him spiraling. One day, I would use them against him. Margaret was more insidious. Her entire existence revolved around appearances. She hosted lavish dinners, obsessed over her reputation, and loathed even the faintest hint of scandal. She smiled in public, but behind closed doors, she was ruthless in preserving the Carter name. Fear of disgrace, that was her Achilles heel. Victoria, however, required closer observation. She strutted through life with entitlement, quick to mock me, quick to demand more from Daniel. I dismissed her at first as shallow and greedy, but then I noticed the cracks. One evening, while rifling through a drawer Daniel had left open, I found a set of documents tucked away: bank statements, company ledgers, and, most damning of all, a note scrawled in Victoria's own hand. She had siphoned money from the family's business. Not once, not twice, but over years. Quietly, greedily, she had stolen from her own blood. My breath caught as I realized the leverage in my hands. If Margaret discovered this, Victoria's gilded pedestal would crumble, and Daniel, desperate to protect himself, might even turn against his sister. That night, the victory felt almost sweet. But as I sat in bed, holding the papers in trembling fingers, memory ambushed me. I thought of my wedding day, of Daniel's smile as he slid the ring onto my finger, of the vow he whispered, "I'll protect you, always." My throat tightened, tears spilling unbidden. How had that promise rotted into this? How had the man I loved become the executioner of my spirit? I pressed the papers against my chest and wept silently into the dark. Not for Daniel, not anymore, but for the woman I once was, the woman who had believed in him. That version of me was gone forever. By dawn, the tears had dried. My resolve returned, harder than steel, and as if fate wished to remind me of my path, another discovery awaited. While tidying Daniel's suit jacket, I found a folded invoice in his pocket. At first, I thought it was just another business receipt, but the details froze me where I stood. A transfer of funds, a private storage unit. My name nowhere listed, yet the sum matched exactly what had been siphoned from our joint account. He was hiding money, preparing for the day he would cast me out with nothing. I stared at the slip of paper, hands trembling, pulse pounding in my ears. The betrayal cut deeper than any insult, any slap of humiliation. Daniel wasn't just controlling me. He was laying the groundwork to erase me completely. And for the first time, I didn't feel fear. I felt something colder, something sharper, because now I had proof not just of their cruelty, but of their intent. Dinner that night was supposed to be ordinary. Margaret had insisted on a formal meal, as she often did, her table set with silverware polished to a gleam, candles flickering between us. I sat quietly, as always, my posture straight, my hands folded neatly in my lap. Daniel relished these evenings, opportunities to parade me as both his trophy and his target. He waited until the wine had been poured, until the roast was carved, before striking. "You really are pathetic, Evelyn," he sneered, his fork clinking against the china. "You contribute nothing. Without me, you'd starve. Even your father couldn't save you from your own incompetence." Margaret's lips curled into a smile, her laugh soft but sharp as glass. "Daniel, don't be too harsh. She does keep the house, though frankly, anyone could do that." Victoria chimed in, her laugh louder, crueler. "She should be grateful. Most women would kill to live the life she wastes." Their laughter swelled together, drowning the room in mockery. I sat frozen, tears welling in my eyes, humiliation searing hotter than the candles on the table. I could feel myself breaking again. My body wanted to collapse, to shrink into nothing. For a moment, I thought I might actually scream. Then it came. The heavy, deliberate stomp of boots across the marble floor. The sound cut through their laughter like a blade. All three of them fell silent, their eyes snapping toward the doorway. My father stood there, his frame broad and commanding in his uniform, flanked by two armed soldiers. His expression was unreadable, carved from stone. The room, once filled with derision, now drowned in silence. Margaret's fork clattered onto her plate. Daniel stiffened, his bravado shrinking as the reality of authority entered the room. And in that moment, I thought, the balance of power shifted. After the meal dissolved into tense quiet, I excused myself under the pretense of needing air. In truth, I left to meet my lawyer. The evidence I had collected over weeks, the recordings, the photos, the documents, was finally delivered. She took the files with careful hands, nodding with approval. "This is more than enough to start," she assured me. By the time we're done, they won't have a leg to stand on. That reassurance carried me back to the house like armor, but Daniel sensed something had changed. His eyes darted toward me, restless, searching. Margaret, too, seemed uneasy, though she covered it with haughty glares. Victoria, for once, had no venom on her tongue. She looked pale, her hands fidgeting nervously with her napkin. They didn't know what I had done, not yet, but they could feel the shift. Days later, the first summons arrived. Margaret scoffed, trying to dismiss it as nonsense. "Lies," she spat. "Fabrications. None of this will hold." Her voice trembled despite her words. Daniel reacted differently. He exploded. "You think you can drag my name through the mud?" he roared, slamming his fist against the wall. His anger, once a tool of control, now felt more like desperation. He was losing his grip, and he knew it. Victoria said nothing. She sat in the corner, biting her lip until it bled, her mask of superiority finally slipping. She knew her secrets could be next, that her greed was no longer safe in the dark. But just when I thought the ground beneath me had steadied, betrayal struck from a place I never expected. It came in the form of a phone call. My lawyer's voice was calm, but beneath it, I sensed alarm. "Evelyn, did you tell anyone else about our strategy? Anyone outside your immediate circle?" My stomach nodded. "No, why?" "Because Daniel's team already knew about the bank records. They came prepared, as if they'd been warned." I felt the blood drain from my face. Only one person outside my lawyer and father knew pieces of the plan. Clara. My last friend, the one I had clung to even after suspecting her closeness to Margaret. I had convinced myself she was safe, that she pitied me enough to remain loyal. But the truth was clear now. She had betrayed me. She had handed my secrets to Daniel, feeding his defense before I could strike. I sat in my room that night, the USB drive in my hands, my heart pounding with fury and dread. For weeks, I had built this case carefully, quietly. I had believed I was ahead. But with Clara's betrayal, everything was at risk. The soldier's boots still echoed in my ears, the memory of power in my father's presence, a reminder that I was not alone. But even so, I couldn't escape the fear clawing at me. Would my entire plan unravel because of the one person I dared to trust? The weeks after Clara's betrayal spiraled into open conflict. Daniel no longer hid behind closed doors. He went public, feeding stories to anyone who would listen. Whispers spread through town, carefully seeded rumors that I was unstable, paranoid, a woman unfit to manage her own life. "She's imagining things," people repeated. "She's sick." Poor Daniel, living with someone like that. Margaret worked her networks like a spider weaving silk. She entertained the city's elite with quiet dinners, smiling graciously as she painted me as a deranged wife threatening her son's reputation. Her words dripped with feigned sorrow. "It breaks my heart," she'd sigh. "But Evelyn needs help, professional help. We all fear for Daniel's safety." With her reputation and charm, the narrative spread like wildfire. Victoria added fuel in her own way. She hired a private investigator, a man who lurked in cars across the street, who trailed me to grocery stores, who lingered outside therapy appointments. His presence was suffocating, a constant reminder that even in public, I was trapped. Every move I made was logged, ready to be twisted into proof of instability. Then came the summons. I was dragged into court, my evidence contested, my sanity questioned. It was exactly what they wanted, to paint me as a hysterical woman grasping for revenge. I sat at the defendant's table, my lawyer by my side, my body trembling despite the mountain of preparation. Before the judge entered, I felt a familiar presence beside me. My father sat close, his hand resting over mine. For so long, I had carried the weight of this war in silence, convinced I had to stand alone. But in that moment, in the stillness of the courtroom, I whispered the truth. "Dad, I'm scared." He tightened his grip, his eyes steady, his voice low but unyielding. "Don't be afraid, Evelyn. You are not alone." His words anchored me as proceedings began. Daniel's lawyer painted vivid pictures of me as unstable, prone to fits of paranoia, a danger to myself and those around me. Margaret's friends testified with rehearsed pity, recounting tales of my erratic behavior. Victoria sat smugly, ready to deliver her own performance. But my lawyer was relentless. One by one, the pieces of evidence I had gathered were unveiled. Recordings of Daniel's threats filled the courtroom, his voice echoing through the speakers with venom. Photos of bruises, of financial documents signed without my consent, flashed across the screen. For every accusation they hurled, I answered with proof. And each time, the audience murmured, doubt creeping into the narrative Margaret had spun. Then, the tide shifted. Victoria took the stand, her chin high, her confidence unshaken. She answered questions smoothly until one slip unraveled her mask. Pressed about the family's finances, she stammered, then let slip a reference to accounts no one had mentioned in court. My lawyer seized it, pouncing with precision. "How would you know about those accounts, Miss Carter, unless you had access to them?" The courtroom buzzed, papers shuffled. Victoria paled, her composure cracking as questions rained down. In her flustered state, she admitted more than she intended, hinting at money moved without proper authorization. My lawyer leaned in, smiling faintly. "So, you're telling us you siphoned funds from the Carter estate?" Gasps echoed through the chamber. Margaret's face blanched. Daniel's head snapped toward his sister in fury. The family's united front fractured in an instant. Daniel exploded. "You stole from me? From all of us?" His voice boomed, finger stabbing toward Victoria. "And you!" he shouted at Margaret. "You covered for her!" The courtroom erupted, order struggling to be restored. For the first time, I didn't feel like the hunted, I felt like the storm. Their lies were unraveling not by my hands alone, but by their own greed and carelessness. But just as victory seemed within reach, Margaret made her move. Her lips curled into that familiar smile, her composure restored as if she had expected this moment all along. She reached into her bag and produced a folder, sliding it across the table to her lawyer. "Your Honor," her attorney announced, "we have new evidence. A certified document proving Evelyn's instability, signed by a medical professional." The judge took it, flipping through pages that bore my name, damning words of diagnosis I had never seen before. My breath caught in my throat. My heart hammered so loud I could barely hear. Margaret's eyes met mine, gleaming with triumph. The ground beneath me trembled once again. The courtroom grew heavy as the judge leafed through Margaret's so-called medical documents. Each page bore my name, each filled with phrases like paranoid delusions and emotional instability. For a heartbeat, I thought it was over. Whispers rippled across the gallery, and I could see Margaret's satisfaction radiating like heat. She thought she had buried me for good. But then my lawyer stood, calm and composed. "Your Honor, before we address these documents, the defense would like to present additional evidence." She nodded at me. My hands trembled as I reached into my bag and pulled out the small USB I had clutched through sleepless nights. The bailiff delivered it to the bench, and soon the courtroom filled with the sound of Daniel's voice. It was sharp, cruel, undeniable. "If you ever try to leave me, Evelyn, I'll ruin you. I'll make sure you walk away with nothing. Do you understand?" Gasps filled the room. Another clip followed. Margaret whispering, "She's pathetic. She'll believe anything you tell her." Then Victoria's mocking laugh. "We'll take it all before she even notices." The judge's eyes narrowed as clip after clip played, each recording unraveling the facade they had built. Their accusations of my instability were drowned beneath the weight of their own words. I sat motionless, listening to the echoes of my pain transformed into weapons of truth. By the time the last recording ended, the room was electric with shock. Margaret's face drained of color, her hands gripping the table so tightly her knuckles whitened. Victoria stared at her lap, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Daniel shifted in his seat, sweat glistening on his forehead, fury simmering behind his clenched jaw. The judge looked up, voice firm. "It is evident from this evidence that the accusations against Mrs. Carter were fabricated. Furthermore, the court will launch a full investigation into financial misconduct on the part of Mr. Carter and his family." The verdict landed like thunder. Their empire of lies collapsed in a single strike. I had won. Not through rage, not through violence, but through patience, strategy, and the truth they had tried so hard to bury. As the gavel struck, Daniel leaned toward me, his voice low, venomous. "You'll regret this. You'll pay." I turned my head, meeting his glare with calm I didn't know I possessed. I smiled, not cruelly, but with a quiet certainty. "No, Daniel. I'm finally free." That was the last time I looked at him. In the weeks that followed, the dust settled. Margaret and Victoria withdrew from public life, their reputations shredded by scandal. Daniel faced charges that stripped him of his influence and wealth. Their names, once spoken with reverence, were now met with disdain. For me, the world opened. Freedom was intoxicating. I filed for divorce and was granted full separation, along with a share of assets they had tried to steal. It wasn't about the money. It was about reclaiming what was mine, proving I was never the helpless woman they wanted me to be. With my father's encouragement, I used the settlement to launch a small consulting firm. What began modestly grew quickly, fueled by the same determination that had carried me through the darkest years of my life. Clients respected me not just for my expertise, but for the resilience I carried into every room. Friends I had lost returned one by one when the truth surfaced. Apologies came, hesitant but sincere, and I accepted them. I reconnected with Clara only to decline her attempts at reconciliation. Some betrayals could not be undone, but with others I rebuilt bonds, rediscovering laughter that didn't cut and voices that didn't wound. Months later, I even allowed myself the chance at love again. Cautiously, gently, with someone who respected my scars rather than exploited them. I didn't need saving anymore. I had learned to save myself, but I welcomed partnership built on trust, not chains. One evening, as summer surrendered to autumn, I sat on the porch of my new home. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves. I wrapped my arms around my knees, watching the horizon burn gold with the setting sun. For the first time in years, the silence felt safe, not suffocating. I closed my eyes, letting the breeze brush my face, and smiled. Not the forced smile I had worn for survival, but one born of peace. Justice had not erased the past, but it had given me back my future, and I understood, with clarity sharp as glass, justice was never about revenge. It was about reclaiming my life, piece by piece, breath by breath.